Hello everyone, welcome to Viti Pathshala. So in this class we would be going to study 8th class social science, and that is the term third and the economics chapter, and that is the public and the private sector. So इस class में हम public and private sector पढ़ने वाले हैं. So we would be going to study about the public and private sector. So, what would be our learning objective? So, the learning objective would be to know the history of the public sector, then to know the various indicators of the socio-economic development, then to understand the importance of the public sector, to appreciate the difference between the public and the private sector, to understand the functions of the private sector. So, these would be our learning outcomes. So, good evening to all of you, and I hope we can start the class. So, first, we will start with the introduction part. Now, India was basically an agrarian economy. So, स्टार्टिंग में अगर हम बात करें, जो हमारी इकोनॉमी थी वो एग्रीकल्चर पर ज्यादा प्रभावित थी, ज्यादा बेस्ड थी, with a weak industrial base at the time of the independence. So, industry was weak. Now, there were high level of the poverty, illiteracy, and unemployment in the country. India experienced a very poor economic and the social overheads. So बहुत बुरा हाल था. लिटरेसी थी, पावर इलिटरेसी थी, पॉवर्टी थी, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट थी, देन इकोनॉमिक और सोशल स्फेयर वो लैक कर रहा था. Now, why this was happening? Now, it is the principally for their reasons that the state had to play an extensive role in the developing of the country. Hence, India conceived to have an Indian economy on the socialist line. So, Indian economy was based on the socialist lines. The economic growth may be sustained at maximum rate if private sector and the public sector they join the hands. Now, India followed the mixed economic system that is operated both by the private enterprises and the public enterprises. So मिक्स्ड इकोनॉमी में क्या होता है, आपके दोनों जो सेक्टर हैं वो को एग्जिस्ट करते हैं, बोथ द पब्लिक एंड द प्राइवेट दे को एग्जिस्ट. So we adopted a mixture and the private partnership. Now, public and the private sector. Now, there are all kinds of business organization that are the small or the large. It may be industrial or the trading. It may be private owned or the government owned in the country. Now, these organizations they affect in our daily economic life, and therefore they became the part of the Indian economy. Now, since the economy consists of both private and the public, private owned, both the private owned and the government owned business enterprises, it is known as the mixed economy. So, आपको दोनों player मिलेंगे. You will find that the public as well as private players. So that is defined as the economy that is mixed economy. Now the government of India has adopted for a mixed economy where both the private and the governmental enterprises are allowed to operate. The economy therefore may be classified into two sectors. So these sectors are your the private sector and the public sector. The public sector and the private sector are allotted their respective roles in the society. They have their particular or the respective roles in promoting the economic welfare of all sections and of the community. So, what is the aim? Aim is providing the economic welfare, and both are playing their respective roles or the duties they are following. Public sector ownership of the government, whereas the private sector industries are under the ownership of the private people. The public sector it enables the full growth in an economy. Public sector is on service motive, and the private sector is on the profit motive. Now, what happened when India got independent? We found that there were the two models, or we can say that there were the two major models. One of the US, that is the capitalist model or the liberal society, was there. There, the power was in the hands of the in the Western world. They focus more on the privatization, capitalization. Whereas if we the other side, at the time of the Cold War, we have the other perspective of the USSR, Russia. They were focusing on the socialism. Everything that was in the hands of the government, everything was provided by the government. But India realized that we need the development, and development in the life of the people. The people were very poor, they were the economically downtrodden. Illiteracy was there, unemployment was there. So it was decided we will take the a mixture, a mixed form of the public and the private, and both will run simultaneously. Now, mixed economy is the both a mixture of the merits of the both the capitalism and the socialism. Now, in the political science also, or the polity, we have studied that. Now, Indian constitution is also a mixture of the best practices that are followed in the world. The same way in the economics also, if we talk, so we are following the best models which were there in the world. Now, Indian economy, the public sector and the private sector. In public sector, here comes is the departmental undertaking, the statutory corporations, government companies, sole proprietorship. Sorry, the government companies. Then private sector, mein it comes a sole proprietorship, then the partnership, a joint Hindu family, cooperative company. That is the company may be public. That is the public limited company, or the private limited companies. Then multinational corporations. Now, definition of the public sector. So, what is the definition of the public sector? Now, the definition of the public sector is that the sector which is engaged in the activities of providing the government goods and the services to the general public, and that is known as the your public sector. The enterprises, agencies, and the bodies are fully owned, controlled, and run by the government, whether it may be a central government, state government, or a local government. For example, the transportation services. Now, in the transportation, you will find now there are the private players who are also running the buses, and in the same way, you have the public. And whereas now the model, that is the metro that has come, the model of the metro is different. In the metro, you have the public private partnership, and that is called as the limited company. Now, history of the public sector. Now, when India achieved the independence in 1947, it was primary and agricultural country. Now, this the history of the public sector. It is important for your the means answer writing. Now, when India achieved independence in 1947, it was primarily the agricultural country with a weak industrial base. So industries were less because, dude, the Britishers, they never focus on the establishment of the industries in India. Their major goal or the aim was to make the maximum profit and extraction of the raw material. So that's why they were focusing more on the extraction of or the implementation of the raw material. Now, there were only 18 Indian ordnance factories in the country, which the British has established for their own economic interest and the rule of the subcontinent with the brute force. Now, the national consensus was in the favor of the rapid industrialization of the economy, which was seen as the key to the economic development, the improving the living standards and the economic sovereignty. So, the aim was economic development, improving living standards, and the economic sovereignty. Now, these are the keywords you have to write in your exam. What the economics development, improving the living standard, and the economic sovereignty. Now, then comes as the building upon the Bombay Plan, which noted the requirement of the government's intervention and the regulation. The first industrial policy resolution announced in the 1948, it laid down the broad contours of the strategy of the industrial development. Subsequently, the Planning Commission, which is an informal body, was formed by a cabinet resolution in the March 1950. So remember here, the Planning Commission has been formed by a resolution. Now it is not. Now remember here, it is not a constitutional or statutory body. Now it has been again in the 2015 when the Modi government came, it has been transformed into the Niti Ayog. And the Industrial Act was enacted in the 1951 with the objective was empowering the government to take the necessary steps to regulate the industrial development. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru promoted an economic policy based on the import substitution industrialization, and he advocated a mixed economic system. Now you have to go into the deep analysis that the thoughts of the our Prime Minister. So the thoughts of the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru were more influenced by the socialism. So he was focusing more on the socialist principles, and a blend of the socialism and the democracy we have implemented, and that is known as the welfare state. Now he believed that the establishment of the basic and the heavy industry was the fundamental to the development and the modernization of the Indian economy. Now India's second 5-year plan, now this is an important point. And the Industrial Policy Resolution of the 1956, it emphasized the development of the public sector enterprise to meet the Nehru's national industrial policy. His vision was carried out by the Dr. V. Krishna Murthy. He was known as the father of the public sector undertakings in the India. Indian statistician, that is the Professor PC Mahal Nobis. So he's a famous person. Now you will find in the political science book of the NCRT of the 12th class the mentioning about the PC Mahal Nobis was instrumental to its formation, which was subsequently termed as the Friedman Mahal Nobis model. The 1991 industrial policy was radically different from the all earlier policies where the government was deliberating the disinvestment of the public sector, and it was allowing the greater freedom to the public sector. Now the major reforms was the 1991 industrial policy, the most popularly known as the LPG: liberalization, privatization, and the globalization. Now we were so afraid after the independence that we are not opening the our economy, or the limited opening of our economy was there. But at the later stage we realized that in order to improve the economy we require the better industrial policy. We should open our gates to the foreign companies, and we should adopt the liberalization, privatization, and the globalization. Now, at the same time, the foreign direct investment was invited from the business houses outside the India. So FDI, it started in the India. Remember that. And you will find that at that time only the policy that was formulated by our former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, though then he was the uh, then he suggested this LPG reforms, and then the gates for the foreign companies. You will realize that at the same time only the foreign companies like the McDonald and the other franchises, they started coming to the India. Now the multinational corporation which operate in the more than one country, it gained the entry into the Indian economy. Thus, we have the public sector units, private sector enterprises, and the multinational corporations coexisting in the Indian economy. Now, what are the objectives of the public sector? Now, to promote the rapid economic development through creation and the expansion of the infrastructure, to generate the financial resource for the development, to promote the redistribution of the income, and to create employment opportunities, to promote the balanced regional growth, to encourage the development of the small scale and ancillary industries, to accelerate the export promotion and the import substitution. Now, public sector organization, there are the two types of the public sector organization. That is, either the government fully finances them through the revenue they raise by the collecting the taxes, duties, fees, etc. So one is the this way you can do that. Now, of the government holds more than the 51% total share of the company, capital of the company, which comes under the various ministries. The enterprises are established with the service motive. Now, it is the largest sector which works for the upliftment of the people by providing the following services. Now, which are these services? The services include the postal service, then the railway service, the providing the security, education, then health facilities at the low cost, generation of the employment opportunities. Now, organs of the public sector administration by the government department. Now, it is very common almost in the all the countries. Example: post and the telegraph, railway, port trust, irrigation projects on India, etc. Then the joint sector companies. Now, it is governed by a company law and controlled by the government as the principal major shareholder. Now, examples of this are your the Indian Oil, Patrons Private Limited, Indian Oil Sky Tanking Limited, Ratnagiri Gas and the Power Private Limited, and then the others are also Indian Synthetic Rubber Limited. Then the third type it comes here is of your the public corporations. Now, this type of the organization it is established of the public corporation by the state of the of the parliament of the legislature. Now, here you will find that the examples are LAC, LIC, Air India, Reserve Bank of India, and the Electricity Board. Now, here, now you have it was in the news that the stakes of the LIC and the Air India, so it has been sold. So गवर्नमेंट अपने शेयर्स जो है वो कम कर रही है और अल्टीमेटली जो है बेच रही है. नाउ क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ द इंडस्ट्रीज. द पब्लिक सेक्टर इन द इंडिया owes its origin in the 1956 industrial policy resolution of the government of India. This 1956 resolution classified industry in the three categories. Now, इंडस्ट्रीज को तीन भागों में बांटा गया था. इंडस्ट्रीज विच वुड एक्सक्लूसिवली ओन्ड बाय द स्टेट उनको रेफर किया गया शेड्यूल ए. Then the industries in which the private sector could supplement the efforts of the state, where you have some scope of the private sector, then that is referred as the state taking the sole responsibility for the starting new units. मतलब कि नई यूनिट्स कौन स्टार्ट करेगा? न्यू यूनिट शुड बी स्टार्टेड बाय द स्टेट. और वहीं पे प्राइवेट सेक्टर है, इट कुड सप्लीमेंट द एफर्ट्स. इनको कहा गया शेड्यूल बी इंडस्ट्रीज. Then the remaining industries which were in the private sector are mentioned as the Schedule C. Now, public sector is divided into the following 9 categories. सबसे पहला आपका था private sector enterprise must supply the essential infrastructure for the economic development. Means essential infrastructure for economic development, which are known as the primary public utilities, which include following: airlines, shipping, railways, power generation, telecommunication, etc. Then next comes is your the public sector enterprise also to have the control of the commanding heights of the economy. Example: defense हो गया, बैंक हो गया, coal mines होगी, oil and the sea, स्टील, ये सब किसके हाथ में होगा? पब्लिक के. Then they are to play an entrepreneurial role. So here a role of the entrepreneurial role has to be played. In other words, called as the capital intensive industries. Example: iron ore industry हो गई, then petrochemical, fertilizers, mining, shipbuilding, heavy engineering, etc. Then public sector enterprise अंडर दी गवर्नमेंट की मोनोपोली होगी, मतलब कि उसमें मोनोपोली का मतलब होता है दूसरे प्लेयर नहीं है, देर आर नो अदर प्लेयर इन दैट। Example, the defense, the production, or the railways, rolling stock, etc. Then public sector enterprise, which are the exclusively meant for the high technology industries. मतलब कि इनमें तो बिल्कुल ही हम अलाउ नहीं कर सकते हैं हाई टेक्नोलॉजी इंडस्ट्री, जैसे कि आपकी एटॉमिक एनर्जी है, वी कैन नॉट परमिट द प्राइवेट सेक्टर हेयर। नाउ कंज्यूमर ओरिएंटेड पब्लिक सेक्टर अंडरटेकिंग, जैसे कि ड्रग, पेपर, होटल्स। देन पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटरप्राइज which is set up in order to take over the sick private unit, जैसे कि टेक्सटाइल, इंजीनियरिंग, एटसेट्रा। देन पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटरप्राइज विच आर सेट टू ट्रेड कॉरपोरेशंस के लिए, एफसीआई, सीसीआई। Then public sector enterprise which serves as a consultancy and the engineering services, जैसे कि Macon. Now you can see the pictures also. The beautiful pictures have been shown to resemble these things. Now Niti Aayog, National Institution of the Transforming India. Now this is very important. You should know the name, know the full form of this also. नीति आयोग की फुल फॉर्म पता होनी चाहिए आपको। Niti Aayog replaced the 65-year-old Planning Commission. Planning Commission has power to allocate the funds to the ministries and the states. This function will be now with the Finance Ministry. So पहले जो प्राइम जो प्लानिंग कमीशन कर रहा था, अब ये जो फंक्शन किसको दे दिया गया, फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री को दे दिया गया है। Now, Niti Aayog is a policy think tank and a truly advisory body. It was formed on the January 1st, 2015. So next topic it comes is the socio-economic development. Now, socio-economic development is the process of the social and the economic development in a society में, एक society में। Now, socio-economic development इसको measure किया जाता है with some indicators. It is measured with some indicators. Now, such as the GDP, life expectancy, literacy, level of the employment. The new think tank, that is the Niti Aayog, can form a suitable platform in the integrating social sector initiative of the center, state, and the local bodies. It can be integrated. Now, socio-economic development, the GDP, life expectancy, they have shown you the beautiful pictures through which you can analyze these things. Now, indicators of the socio-economic development के indicators क्या होते हैं? What are indicators? So first comes is your gross domestic product. Now, GDP supports in the developing the socio-economic development. Now, the proportion of the GDP by the industrial sector, both private and the public sector, इसको increase किया गया है. It has been increased. It results increasing government fund and the increasing the public spending. Now, life expectancy, according to the 2011 census of the India, life expectancy in the India is 65.80 years for the men and the 68.33 years for the women. Now, the government provides a high degree of the health measures through the various program. Now, the government announced in the unit budget of the 2018-19 the National Health Production Scheme to serve the poor and the vulnerable families. Now, this topic which I am doing is for your mains perspective. These datas you can quote in your exam, as these are the recent data, so they can help you in your exam. Next comes is the literacy. Now, educational skills play a vital role in the socio-economic development. Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan is a government of the India flagship program. It is implemented for the making the compulsory education to the children 6 to 14 years with the life skills. The government also introduced the RMSA, smart classes, e-learning, free computer skill classes, and eco-friendly studying environment, digital India, for increasing the level of the quality of the education. And new education policy you can add in this literacy program, you can add the new education policy. Now, employment. There is a clear shift in the employment to the secondary and the tertiary sector from the primary sector. A growing number of the people moved urban areas in the search of the employment. It increased the urban population, and the government started the smart city scheme, which provides the city with the many facilities जैसे कि hospital, school, housing facilities and the shopping centers. Now to promote the rural and the backward areas in terms of the employment, the government encourages the private sector to start an industry in backward areas by providing the tax benefits at the low tariff, etc. It removes the regional inequality. Then provision of the house, clean drinking water and the sanitization. Now, the government sector provide the housing facility, clean drinking water facility, and the sanitary facility under the Clean India planning. Now, if you are following the current affairs, now the Prime Minister from the Red Fort, he has announced that for the migration workers, the houses would be provided. So, in the urban areas, there would be the housing scheme, and it has been launched for the people who migrate. Now, do follow the current affairs and do add those things in these your the static part. Now, by providing these facilities, the life cycle of the people it increases. Now, importance of public sector की क्या importance है? Public sector it plays a major role in the development of an economy. It has following importance: public sector and the capital formation. The role of the public sector in collecting, saving, and the investing them during the planning period have been very important. Then next comes is your the economic development. Economic development mainly it depends upon the industrial development. Heavy and the basic industries जैसे कि आपकी iron, steel and the shipping, mining, etc. are required to supply the raw material to small industries. Then balanced regional development. Public sector will focus on the balanced regional development. Public sector undertaking have located their plants in the backward parts of the country. Now these areas lack the basic industrial and the civic facilities. Now, I will give you a basic example of that. You will find that the refineries at the various places. Now, there is a refinery in the Panipat also. So, why the refinery where there is no AL or the no resource of the raw material is found, but the refinery has been established in the Panipat, Haryana, because this will this will impact other features also. If and a refinery would be opened there, it will provide employment, it will increase the socio-economic condition of that area. So balanced regional development it require the public sector to interfere. Now like the electricity, water supply, township and the manpower, public enterprise has have developed these facilities, thereby bringing about the complete transformation in the socio-economic life of the people in these regions. Now, employment generation is one of the objective of the public sector. Public sector has created the millions of the job to tackle the unemployment problem in the country. The number of the person employment employed during the year 2011 was the 150 lakh. Public sector has also contributed to a lot towards the improvement of the working and the living conditions of the worker by serving as a model employer. Next comes is the export promotion and the foreign exchange earning. Now, some public enterprises have done the much to promote the India's export. The State Trading Corporation (STC), the Mineral and the Metal Trading Corporation, Hindustan Steel Limited, the Bharat Electronics Limited, the Hindustan Machine Tools, etc., have done very well in the export production. Then comes is the protection of the sick industries. So there are some sick industries, and it is the role or the objective of the government to protect them. Public sector to prevent the sick unit closing down takes over their responsibility. For example, a sick bank, a private sick bank, then the control of that bank has to be taken by the government to make it feasible. Now, to prevent the sick unit closing down, take over their responsibility and prevent the many people from getting the unemployed. Not only this, but the prevents the unnecessary locking of the capital, land, building, machinery, etc. Import substitution. Now, some public sector enterprises were started specifically to produce goods which were the formerly imported and thus to save the foreign exchange. The Oil and the Natural Gas Commission (ONGC), the Indian Oil Corporation Limited, the Bharat Electronics Limited, etc., have saved the foreign exchanges by the way of the import substitution. The largest public sector employer in the India is your Indian Railways. Now, what are the differences between the public and the private sector में फर्क क्या है, differences क्या हैं? So though the public sector and the private sector work together for the developing the country, they have the different goals and the motives. Here are the some important differences between them. So public sector ownership of the industry is with the government. Owner कौन है? सरकार है. Owner कौन है? कोई private व्यक्ति है या फिर corporation है. Public revenue it depends upon the levy of the taxes, then on the income tax and the commodities and the services. Here issuing the shares and the debenture or by taking the loan, the private sector it generates the money. Now public sector it ensures the proper wage, private sector exploits the worker. So that's why the most of the people are attracted towards the government jobs. The public sector is the proper wage and the public sector exploits the worker. Now, it does not allow the concentrate the huge wealth in the fewer hands or the rich. Concentration of the huge wealth in the fewer hands or the rich people. Now, public sector industries example NLC, Cell, BSNL. Private sector industries जैसे कि TVS Motor हो गया, Ashok Leland, Tata Steel. These are the public sector industries. Now next comes no tax evasion. Tax evasion is possible. It is service oriented, purely the profit oriented. यहाँ पर समाज सेवा करनी है, यहाँ पर profit maximize करना है. Then reservation are the implemented. Priority is given to the socially backward people. Now it does not care the socially backward class. Reservation is not followed. Now, list of the public sector undertaking in India. As for the year 2017 के according, there are 8 Maharatna industries, 16 Navratna industries, and 74 the Mini Ratna industries. Now, there are nearly 300 CPSC Central Public Sector enterprises. Now, Maharatna industries. Now, 3 years with an average annual net profit of 20 rupees 2500 crore or the annual net worth of rupees 10,000 crore for the 3 years or annual turnover of the 20,000 crore for the 3 years against the 25,000 crore prescribed earlier. इनको जो है we will call them as the Maharatan industries. Now examples are these are the 8 industries, you have to remember all of them. Now these include the national thermal power generation, then NTPC oil, then the natural gas, ONGC steel and the Steel Authority of the India, Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited, Indian Oil Corporation, and then the Coal India Limited, the Gas Authority of the India Limited, and the Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited. A Navratna, a score of the 60 out of the 100 based on the 6 parameters per. सो 100 में से 60 का स्कोर होना चाहिए. 6 पैरामीटर्स हैं विच इंक्लूड नेट प्रॉफिट, नेट वर्थ, टोटल मैन पावर कॉस्ट, टोटल कॉस्ट ऑफ द प्रोडक्शन, कॉस्ट ऑफ द सर्विस, PBDIT, profit based depreciation, interest and the taxes, capital employed, etc. A company must first be a mini ratna and have 4 independent directors on its boards बिफोर इट बी मेड अ नवरत्न. पहले उसको मिनी रत्न होना पड़ेगा, जब उसको हम नवरत्न डिक्लेयर करेंगे. एग्जाम्पल भेल, कॉनकोर, EIL, HAL, HPCL, MTNL, नाल्को, NLCIL, then Oil India Limited and SCI. Next comes is the mini ratna industries. In the mini Ratna industry, they have made the profit continuously for the last 3 years or earned a net profit of the rupees 30 crore or more in the one of the 3 years. Now, some of the mini Ratna industries are the Airport Authority of India, the Bharat Dynamics Limited, the Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited, BSNL, the CPCL, ITPO, STCI. then many Ratan industries. Now iske liye what is the criteria? The criteria for these are the have the profit continuously for the last 3 years and should have the positive net worth hona chahiye. Example, HMT International Limited, Indian Medicine and the Pharmaceutical Corporation Limited, Macon Limited, Mineral Exploration Corporation Limited, National Film Development Corporation Limited, Bharat Pumps and the Compressors Limited. Now, the term Navaratna, it is meant a talisman composed of the nine precious gems. Now, later the term was adopted in the court of the Gupta Emperor Vikramaditya and the Mughal Emperor Akbar as the collective name for the nine extraordinary countries at their respective courts. Now, what is the definition of the private sector? Now, the segment of a national economy that is owned or the controlled and the managed by the private. Here, it is controlled, managed, owned by the private individual. उसको हम private sector बोलेंगे. The private sector companies are divided on the basis of the sizes which are privately or the publicly traded organization. They can be created in two ways, either by the formation of a new enterprise. So two ways, formation of the new enterprise or the privatization of any public social enterprise. The private sector is a part of the country's economic system that is run by the individuals and the companies rather than the government. Even the vast expansion of the public sector, the contribution of the private sector continued to be the large. This was due to the development of the medium, small and the very small or the micro industries. Also the contributions of the product of the cottage and the village industries and the small scale industries is a major portion of the wholesale and the retail trade. Now, the contribution of the private sector towards the national production is higher than the public sector. Private sector is dominant in the road, ship, and the airways transport, and also in the consumer industries. Now, major private companies are Infosys, Aditya Birla Company, then Reliance Industries, Tata Group, Wipro, Hindustan Unilever Limited, and the ICICI Bank Limited. Now, functions of the private sector, the main function of the private sector is to create the innovation and the modernization. The profit motive drives them to invent, innovate new technologies of the production and manage the productive activities in the scientific manner, develop and maintain the infrastructure and the services, promote and the expand the existing business. Now, promote the human capital development to help the vulnerable group, especially to participate in the labor market and encourage the community development by promoting the community business and the cooperatives, local exchange system, and the informal credit. Now, promote the small, micro, and the medium enterprise, that is the SMME, through supply side measures and the demand side measures, and attract the investment in the city. In India, being this is your conclusion part starts from here. If you have to write conclusion, this would be your conclusion. In India, being a mixed economy, has assigned a great importance on the private sector of the country for attaining the rapid economic development. The government has fixed a specific role to the private sector in the field of the industries, trade, and the service sector. The most dominant sector of the India, that is the agriculture and the other allied activities like the dairying, animal husbandry, poultry, etc., is totally under the control of the private sector. Thus, the private sector is playing an important role in the managing the entire agricultural sector and thereby providing the entire food supply of to the millions. Moreover, the major portion of the industrial sector engaged in the non-strategic and the light areas, producing the various consumer goods, both the durables and the non-durables, electronic and the electrical goods, automobile, textiles, chemical, food products, light engineering goods, etc. It is also under the control of the private sector. The social and the economic challenges before the country are great. Now, to meet the targets in the structural transformation and the economic growth, public sector and the private sector must join together. Now, this was in the eighth class. We have completed the eighth class. हमारी eighth class complete हो गई है. And tomorrow we would be doing the ninth class को हम कल complete कर लेंगे. So ninth class, there are I think three chapters of the economics. So आपकी कंप्लीट हो चुकी है, सेवंथ इज कंप्लीट, एट्थ इज ऑल्सो कंप्लीट इन टर्म्स ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक्स, and tomorrow we would be doing the three chapters of the ninth would also be covered tomorrow, and 10th we will be doing on the Monday. So I hope you like the class, and apart from that I would be giving you the audio of a recital. I would be sharing the audio files of the recital so you can listen to that. And one thing is that these audios are only in the Hindi. So, and these are not in the English. So, I would be sharing with you. So, all those who are comfortable with these, they can watch these. So, that was all. Thank you, all of you. We will be meeting tomorrow at the 9, and we will be doing the ninth class, the three chapters of the economics. So, that's all in this.